Okay, perfect. Hi, good afternoon to everybody who is joining us in today's webinar. Welcome to our first monthly World Urban Parks webinar. First of all, I want to introduce myself. I'm Alice Linden, Research Development Advisor of World Urban Parks, and on behalf of the World Urban Parks team, I want to thank you all for joining us today. As always, we love for our participants to get to know each other and to say hello. So please, as you come in, do write us in the chat which organization you're coming from and which park and which country you're from. Before we start the webinar, and I'm going to try to be brief because we have a lot of brilliant presenters who are going to share their insights today, I want to share some important announcements. So this webinar is part of Parks Week, World Parks Week 2023, which is taking place from April 22nd to April 30th. Parks Week is an opportunity to share how and in what ways we are connecting with World Urban Parks and with the parks around us and celebrate all of our green spaces. This year's edition, we are focusing on equity and inclusion and how these concepts translate into the development, the construction, and the daily life of public spaces in our present and in our future. So do please check our social media networks, our websites, and you can do that to go back to our webinars to see all of the content that will be shared today and to find out how you can get involved with this big parks celebration. I also want to take the time to invite you all to listen to Pod Parks. Pod Parks is the podcast that we recently launched, where every Wednesday we have episodes that are shared with park professionals from around the world. Next Wednesday, so that is tomorrow, our fifth episode is coming out, or sixth episode is coming out about the role of parks in today's societies. And finally, I want to remind you all that the World Urban Parks Congress 2023 is going to be held as a joint event with the Parks and Leisure Australia and supported by Green Adelaide. The event will be from October 22nd to October 25th. And right now, as we are speaking, we still have a call for proposals for all of our Congress sessions. And this call for proposals is open until May the 3rd. So if you have a presentation, do not forget to submit your abstract before May 3rd. And with that being said, I'm going to start off the webinar. I want to remind you all that the content and the recording of this webinar will be found within the WUP online community. So if you have a membership, you will be able to find this webinar and go back to it at worldurbanparks.org. And if not, this is an invitation to do so. If you have any questions or comments for any of our speakers, please feel free to leave them in our Q&A session, and we'll try to answer them at the end of our session. And with that being said, I'm going to head over and hand this webinar over to our hosts, which are Maria Zacariades and Tamura Masamichi. They are the co-chairs of the Aging, Wellbeing, and Parks Committee. Maria, Tamura, thank you and welcome.
Hi, Alicia, thank you so much for the introduction. So following on from our Congress presentation at the Mexico Congress in last year, it's a great honor to be able to present our committee, some members of our committee today in this webinar and have this opportunity to speak on the work that is being done globally, addressing the issues of aging and well-being with our parks. So it is an honor to introduce our speakers today, members of our Aging and Wellbeing Committee. And first we will have Stephanie Firestone from AARP International, Maliga Naidu from the Academy of Leisure Services in Africa, Jacques Cedras from IERM in South Africa. We have Ryu Onu from Japan Park Management Laboratory and Director of World Urban Parks in Japan, and Gil Penalosa, founder of 880 Cities. So we look forward very much to, there's going to be some fascinating presentations here looking at connectivity, challenges, opportunities, of aging in place, well-being in parks. And so without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Stephanie Firestone to speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome everyone, and let me just share my screen and my presentation. There we go. I'm looking to start from the beginning, but can everybody see that? I have to just use this this view. Is that clear? Okay, so my name is Stephanie Firestone from AARP, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization in the United States that supports older adults. Our mission is to enable people to choose how they live as they age. And I lead an initiative called Equity by Design, which is aimed at people in the built environment sector. So city planners and designers and architects and developers, and really trying to get them to incorporate an aging and equity lens in their work. Our Principles in Action series is a series of case studies and webinars that focus on a variety of topics that are helpful for this sector. And the next one that we are doing, the next case study in June, is on this topic of intergenerational play spaces. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. Essentially, playfulness, we know causes a cascade of connections that light up neurons across the brain and cause what is called a play state, sort of that feeling you have when you're so engrossed in something that time stops. And an organization called National Institutes of Play was created by Dr. Stuart Brown. He says play is as basic a human need as our well-being and sleep. And to benefit most from play, we need to incorporate it into our everyday lives and not think about it as, just a thing that we do on vacation. And so I want to talk about a variety of ways that we play and places that we play in cities and other environments. So older adults and grandchildren are seen together playing in more than ever in playgrounds. And this is actually starting to influence the design that enables access to a whole variety of users. So this includes, you can see in this picture, remaking play equipment. This is the Expression Swing by a company called Playcore, which has a toddler or a person with a mobility challenge in a swing across from across from a grandparent or an older adult or their parent who has the ability to swing and push them and propel them. And that, that eye contact promotes attunement between two individuals as they experience this joy of the body moving through space and time. We've seen things like the old-fashioned merry-go-round, which required a step up, if you remember, and is installed often now at the same level as a play environment, including seats or benches, so an older person can also enjoy the spinning motion. So there are a lot of shifts that are happening and can happen in a playground so that it's usable for that purpose. Other things that older adults need are things, seating in the shade. The ability to for a park to be laid out in a way that people can be made to feel safe, have a feeling of safety. They want other people of different ages in the park. That does make people feel safe. They don't want to sit near the trash cans. They need accessible routes or a variety of other amenities that are needed. In Singapore, this is just an example of what I was just talking about in the merry-go-round. Their first intergenerational playground and infant childcare center opened within a nursing home and in 2017. And to promote, the interaction across generations, these are the features that they included. Their senior minister of state for health said at the opening that by leveraging the simple yet universal concept of play, we create opportunities for seniors to gain from the infectious energy of the young, as well as for their young to better understand seniors who share their community. There's also, in parts of Asia in particular, a sort of increasing nostalgia for local playground heritage that's connecting the generations. In many schools in Taiwan in the 1960s, part of their cultural heritage was where you can see this cement slide, a terrazzo slide in the shape of an elephant. Some of them were at the entrance to schools, welcoming children in the morning. One of the adults that went to the school early on said, I hope that my son, like me, will have in his memories a playground, which always keeps him company and will guard his childhood. And there's a story that I saw about a teacher in one elementary school saying the slide did not meet updated safety requirements and was closed off in 2011. The children in the school took it on themselves to investigate and found the manual of safety requirements for children's playgrounds. They took measurements and they realized the deck around the barrier at the top of the slide wasn't tall enough, but they decided adding another barrier to solve the problem would be too plain. So the kids came up with this idea to add a baby elephant on top. And the slide reopened in 2018. The teacher was saying that, seemingly ordinary things are not ordinary at all. And people are calling today for the conservation of these early period terrazzo elephant slides. One woman even started a blog called In Search of Elephant Friends to crowdsource all the elephant slides across Taiwan. I'm going to talk about in the United States, a variety of policies and programs in our history, urban renewal in the 50s and 60s, and at the same time period, the planning of highways that went through neighborhoods, often Black neighborhoods, and decimated some of the communities. They also contributed to lack of play space in many neighborhoods. An organization in the US called Kaboom, a nonprofit, realized at their 25th anniversary that in historically disinvested communities, if they focused on individual playgrounds to address true play space inequity, they would never be successful. So they created a project called 25 in 5 to end play space inequity by identifying 25 community systems that commit to using data to determine where and how to invest, and then driving investments in those communities over a 5-year period. They work with partner organizations on the ground to promote an asset-based approach that focuses on what the community has and what they can bring to the table rather than what's lacking. One of the assets that the community brings is desire and sweat equity. Every playground they do is designed by kids, planned by the local community, and installed by volunteers. A number of other organizations, including Kaboom, partner with them on this concept of play spaces everywhere. So does this have to be a park? How do we turn everyday spaces that we frequent into a space where people can play? And a lot of that is focused on children's learning and caregivers interactions with them to help them advance critical skill development, literacy, math, and spatial executive function, and things like that. And they have an urban thinkscape project at Playful Learning Landscapes that infuses with cities with playful learning infrastructure in everyday spaces. This can include story trails along sidewalks or a park where a set of icons elicits a caregiver to tell young children stories that foster narrative skills that are important to literacy. There are puzzle walls that you can see here that foster spatial skills that are important to the later development of math skills. And all these installations foster socioeconomic skills, socio-emotional skills. The Playful Learning Landscapes developed a playbook that's been translated into Spanish and Portuguese, and together with one of the partners called Together for Play in Brazil, they are developing playful learning spaces in Brazilian favelas. Another really great initiative, which was started by a group in the UK called Playing Out UK, but is actually spread globally, is something called Play Streets, which promotes the creation of temporary, safe play spaces right at people's doorsteps. The initiative for this was, parents who said, gosh, when we grew up, we would go outside our house and we could safely play. And that's where we would get to know our neighbors. We had access to play all the time. And that is just no longer the case in many, many communities. So this is about resident-led street play that also engages older people who sometimes teach games that they used to play in streets and are just lost to younger generation. That's jump rope techniques, songs that accompany a game using a tennis ball against a wall, whatever it is. These are sessions that are held monthly, and the regularity enables people to form ties with neighbors and builds community spirit, especially connecting people who might reduce their loneliness and isolation. So by demonstrating the benefits of safer and more people-friendly streets, the initiative also promotes increased active travel, walking and biking. Bristol was the first place in the UK, and now there are nearly 100 city councils who followed that have created specific street play policies. And the approach has grown into a movement across the country and now internationally. Playing Out has developed guidance for local authorities that can be helpful to local authorities anywhere that are considering implementing play streets. So there's just a number of examples from essentially what's this next case study, as I mentioned, on intergenerational play spaces. We're going to have the case study that we publish at the beginning of June, and then later in the month, a webinar where we have experts in this space who really we conduct a very informal conversation. So it's an opportunity. We have thousands of built environment experts from around the globe who join to both ask questions and dig deeper with these experts, but also share their expertise themselves through the chat and through follow-up activities online. So you can connect with us, learn about all our activities. You can look at prior case studies, prior webinar recordings. You can register for all of our events under Equity by Design at the email, at the address that's on the screen. But I also will mention, it's a long address. If you go to aarpinternational.org.org, you can look for this Equity by Design logo, the red rectangle, and you can get to it there and look at all of our. We also have a series of key insights videos, very short videos that provide some key insights from a variety of engagements that we've had. So with that, I will stop sharing and turn it over to the next presenter. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Absolutely fascinating. Let us move swiftly on now to Malika Naidu. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us at this hour. And thank you very much to World Urban Parks for establishing this platform for us to meet and share our experiences and what we're doing in different parts of the world. Thank you, Stephanie. That was quite enlightening. It was quite a quick round the world trip. I loved the play streets in the UK, so much to learn from everyone. But I'm Malika Naidu, and I'm the director of the Academy of Leisure Sciences Africa. We're a consulting group focusing on international conferencing, webinars, and working with public service within South Africa. So without further ado, let me go on. Sorry, I'm unable to move my screen. Can you help, Alicia?
Yep, give me 1 second.
Ah, there you go.
There you go.
Okay. Right. So I'm not going to dwell too much on the background. I think everyone sitting in this group are pretty much aware of how important it is to have access to outdoor parks and leisure spaces, especially within the public arena, and how important it is and essential, as Stephanie has already pointed out, for people to get together, to play together, and to live together to build essential, livable, and sustainable communities. So people live and thrive within communities to improve quality of life, as well as create lifelong memories. And as Stephanie has also shown, that the older folk would always share what they did while they were growing up, especially when they played out in the streets. So carefully designed local parks and other public spaces are important for people to access across their lifespan, right from the young age through to the older adult. Spaces should be created for this holistic development and interaction. The role of parks and recreation and outdoor spaces became even more crucial during the COVID-19 pandemic. And we have a lot to thank for this period, because it caused a lot of people to introspect as well as understand just how important it is to be healthy and outdoors. And of course, for the powers that be to create these spaces for access and integration and involvement. So it becomes even more essential for families and friends to spend time outdoors. And as Stephanie has also pointed out, it brings people together, it brings neighbors together, and it just creates a more harmonious community environment. Public spaces are valuable and distinctive opportunities for physical activity and meaningful interactions between adults and children. Intergenerational experiences in outdoor settings provide valuable insights for learning in the later school years, and also when people interact within an outdoor environment between parents and children and grandparents and grandchildren. So for a successful strategy, it is important to look at the diverse stakeholders that are involved in these projects. To create an intergenerational park design framework. The partners that one would use would be essentially the public service, private partnerships, as well as academic institutions. Now, in 2018, we hosted the International Conference in Durban, and fortunately, we had quite a few of the parks and recreation people in attendance. The gentleman in the red cap was the recreation manager within the city. And after a few, lunches and interactions in the convention hall, we thought about developing a park and to use it as a pilot project. So he identified a park, which, as you can see from the middle picture, looks like a construction site. It was actually used as part of the hospital construction site, which is right next door. And because the developer did not have space to accommodate all his construction material, the Parks Department allowed them to use the space. So of course, it became quite a mission to get this whole place rehabilitated. And the manager asked me if I'd like to be involved in this project. And of course, it was a wonderful opportunity. It was a small, manageable park. And we got stuck into it in 2018. The first thing we had to do was get the community together and have several discussions and meetings trying to explain to them what the intention was. In the background, you see the hospital development, and you can see how such close proximity to the park. And it served a good function for the hospital developer, who was one of the key role players in redeveloping this site. And of course, we continued to proceed with the development and continued with our consultation process with the community and getting their buy-in and support. And this is what it eventually looked like by March 2020. And of course, 2020 March, we went into shutdown and complete lockdown as a result of COVID-19. Now, the park was about 95% complete, and it all came to a grinding halt. So it was quite disappointing that we couldn't complete it as within the time frame that we had set. So within this project, we involved the students from the universities, and the few students that were involved included the tourism students, social work students, as well as the architecture students. So we gave them the lie of the land, and the brief to them was, I wanted 4 zones to be identified within the space, and each zone would be dedicated to a particular group and offer a variety of activities. So the 4 zones were the one playground area for the children under 12, the fitness exercise station, a herb garden, and a quiet Zen-like area where patients who are terminal patients in the hospital next door could come out and breathe in the fresh air, enjoy the sun and the breeze on their faces with their families or with their medical practitioners. And this is what it ended up looking like. With the far right-hand corner and the big picture on the right was the playground area, which was mostly a nature-based playground with the kids could climb up a little ladder to go into a tree house, as well as logs and stumps that they could jump and hop along and try to crawl under. And of course, the 18 station exercise station was designed to give a total body workout from young adults all the way through to the older adult. And in the middle picture, in the middle column, you would see in the foreground the herb garden, which was planted by residents together with the Parks Department. You can see also there are buildings all around this park. So it was quite a captive site and an interesting site, because the furthest point, from the furthest point to this park, it would be a quick walk of about 10 minutes or less. So it was quite easily accessible. When the park was completed, the community feedback was very encouraging. Most of them were thrilled that they could now just walk down to the park. They didn't even need to cycle down. It was a short walk to the park where they could meet their neighbors, get to know the new neighbors, and didn't have to drive in traffic to about 10-15 minutes away, find parking and go and enjoy an open space. It was also safe and quiet and allowed people to enjoy the calm of the park itself, as well as interact with other people that were visiting. Some of them thought it was a beautiful layout. The whole family could go out and play, and there was just so much to do, although one didn't put too much emphasis on facilities and putting in equipment, but to just use the natural environment to allow people to interact both with the environment and with each other. And as Stephanie alluded, you know, the outdoor space is a perfect opportunity for neighbors to meet. And the herb garden was also quite incredible, because a lot of people would run down and snip a few lettuce leaves or thyme or basil to throw into their pastas and their dishes they were preparing. The doctors also found this to be a very useful space, because they took their patients out into the park. Some of the patients were quite immobile, but they were in their wheelchairs under the trees and just enjoying the space, while the cardiology patients were taken down by the physiotherapists to enjoy. So there was an easy access from the hotel, from the hospital building itself, directly into the park and into the paved area. So some of the features that we thought were important to include and to promote well-being amongst all people that use this space was accessibility. Most of our parks in Durban and surrounding areas have uneven lie of land, which didn't allow for wheelchair access, stroller or walkers. The ground was not really level. Benches and tables were also an important feature because we found that the older adults would meet their friends in the park with their pots of coffee and muffins. It was wonderful to see this actually happen because there was no place for them to actually interact at such an informal level. Also, to minimize the risks, all uneven surfaces were leveled and protruding objects removed. This particular site was full of shrubs, dense bush, and huge trees, maybe over 100 years old. But a lot of it was invasive plantation, which was removed, and all shrubs removed as well, to ensure that there was clear visibility all round. The exercise stations were a mixed design for older and younger adults, and also a trail, a very short trail, but one could use it as a circular trail for running or jogging. It wasn't conducive to cycling, so that's another consideration. The visibility, well, we reduced the dense foliage and the shrubs for safety reasons, and we installed floodlights to ensure that there was proper lighting at night. The hospital also provided us with extra lighting into the park, which almost made it look like daylight at night. The trees were provided a wonderful green canopy cover for shade and also for clean air. Walking distance to the park was a reasonable distance. We had several patients who live in the area after cardiac surgery walk down to the park, and after a couple sessions going down to the park, I think it must have been about a month later, they called to say how wonderful they felt to walk down the road and to go and sit under the trees. So it had a great benefit for all people living in this community. And most importantly, there was such a variety of activities that one could engage in: the labyrinth, the herb garden, the exercise station, watching the children play on the playgrounds. And the tables were also marked with checkers boards. So the kids actually requested they have a chess table within the park, so they could come down with their parents and their friends to play chess. I would have loved to end the story on a positive and enthusiastic note, but the biggest challenge we had was trying to get the municipality to cooperate and continue to maintain the park at an acceptable level. That while we started in 2018, we have still not completed the park because of the lack of resources forthcoming from the municipalities. And the park was ultimately designed to be managed by the residents and to take charge and proprietary over the space to ensure that it's never vandalized. And touch wood, it hasn't been vandalized to date. But the level of systemic racism which continues to prevail in this area prevents a lot of the socializing and interaction from taking place. So we're working on it. Watch this space, and hopefully at the next session, I'll provide you with a more positive ending. Thank you for this opportunity. And with that, I will stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Maliga. Such an interesting project and insight, and ending on such an open note, and just seeing the wildness overtaking there, which perhaps is hopefully a slightly positive underlying note. Let us move on to Jacques Sidras in Cape Town for the next presentation, please.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Jacques here, I represent the IRM, and yes, it's already Wednesday morning in Cape Town. It's a very early morning. I hope everybody can hear me. So the IRM is a very old organization, and I'm going to illustrate, and I'm going to try and explain and then share to you the diverse usage in the open spaces of two typical neighborhoods in South Africa. So the IRM has its members as municipalities. It is a network, and it's a membership base of colleagues in the open space management, recreation facilities, including cemetery management for that matter. We're 86 years old, so we're an old organization. And it's interesting to note the bottom part there that back in 1938, at a conference entitled Management of Municipal Parks and Administration was already represented back then. So I always say to people that the organization and the institute must have done something right to have, can I say, survived 86 years. Nevertheless, South Africa is popularly sort of recognized for its diversity, but also for the inequalities of our country. And this is the situation in post-democratic South Africa, where you have more have-nots and you've got more haves. So we're not proud of it, and it's well publicized that you have communities with really very differing sort of makeups and build-ups and service delivery. So case study number one would be a typical township in South Africa. I'll take you to Gugulethu. It is the very first township that you see when you drive into or even fly into Cape Town. It has its history politically back from the late 60s, and it's really a real typical sort of township, poorest of the poor example in South Africa. This is really what it looks like. So on the left is what you see when you fly in. It's what you see when you drive, and it's there. It's unfortunate that it's there, but it's it's one of the townships and one of the many communities that we have in South Africa. This is the situation in Gugulethu around public accessible open spaces. The top left is what the kids have when they come from school. The top right is the amount of kids that actually take up our open spaces, and the bottom picture, the bigger picture, is really a zoomed out version of what you see top left. That is potentially where it starts for younger uses of our public open spaces. And the illustration around what Gugulethu has to offer is the next slide. And typically, Gugulethu has these open spaces that are multi-purpose open spaces. On the bottom right here, you have a garden that is in the making. At the bottom here, this is a middle-aged to early age typical playground. It has artificial grass. Back here is a picnic area with a bit of an outdoor gym for your adults and slightly older adults. Here, your middle-aged adults and youngsters kick a ball. It's 5-a-side, a mini soccer a playing field. Around here is a multi-purpose court where some of your older kids and younger adults actually play, whether it's basketball or volleyball. And here's a picnic area where your older adults actually do their supervision, sit and relax, read a book. That section there is a closed swimming pool. So this whole property is really a multi-purpose facet of what Gugulethu has to offer. So the young and some of the older adults at play. So this is a typical version of where the youngsters, this would be their sort of first and their entry into open spaces, into recreation, and what a typical facility has to offer. And here is where the adults now come into play, where they supervise, but it is really a aftercare, a creche setup, a preschool setup that is sort of developed across the road from where the facility is. And this is what the youngest of the young are offered into how they interact. So you've got older adults doing obviously some teachings, and this is what's being offered. Next case study would be can I say a leafy suburbs? Everybody knows the term a leafy suburb. More affluent, has a different history. Rondebosch has a very rich Victorian history. It dates back to the late 1800s. It has a lot more going for it. It is a lot more established. It is a typical South African upper age to middle class sort of suburb. It has decent infrastructure. It has a university, the University of Cape Town in its backdrop. It has Table Mountain in its backdrop. So Rondebosch is on the other side of our spectrum in South African communities. And like I say, a rich Victorian history. But it also has a different offering of public open spaces than Gugulethu. Here, open spaces are left uncut. They are left more natural. The top picture there of a young lad running over a tree stump that's just been left. You can see the bottom here. There's no mowing, so it is really in its real natural form. And on the right hand side, the older gentleman is walking his dog. A complete 180-degree difference in the previous community. Older adults on the side here, they can do yoga, they can enjoy the open space. And bear in mind, maintenance is at a bare minimum. The only maintenance that actually happens is around litter picking and a bit of tree pruning here and there. But you can see the contrast in open space enjoyment, whether it's older adults, whether it's youngsters, whether it's middle class in the Rondebosch environment. This is typically what it is. Open spaces. You can roam freely. You can walk your dog. You can literally come and sit and enjoy the sunshine or in the shade. And on the right here, you have a outdoor gym where you could really come and do a few press ups or a few pull ups. And up at the top, there's an element of education where the friends of this particular park has sort of taken ownership, and they sort of inform people of the fauna and the flora that's evident in the open space. that is my presentation, but I would like you to consider my second slide. Is South Africa that diverse in its offering? I thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacques. Very interesting to see South Africa there, examples in such detail. If we move now to Japan and Ryu Ano, please.
Can I share the video?
Yep, you should be able to share now.
Can see it. So
Yeah.
thanks, Jack. I'm presenting a situation in a hyper-aging country, Japan. Me. My name is Ryu Ono. I'm director of WP Japan. So this is the agenda of my short presentation. So going, let's start from the basic of urban parks in Japan. This year, the 150-year anniversary of public urban parks in Japan. Well, I'm going to use an automatic voice from now. So my voice will change because I want to tell you exactly this story. If this goes well, I want to try Spanish too. Enjoy new technology.
Let's see a picture of a pre-modern garden. Since old times, people enjoyed changes of the 4 seasons along with plants. So people would plant colorful flowers and trees in familiar places. Women in this picture might be from samurai families and wealthy merchants. Let's look at common people too. They would have seasonal events in green squares such as temples and shrines to maintain community ties. It was 300 years ago that park-like spaces appeared in the government policy. It was during a multiple political crisis. The government was losing revenues from mining, facing economic difficulties already. Then, extreme weather events, and even a locust plague, caused a great famine, making society very unstable. Despite all these difficulties, however, the Edo government provided recreation places in its suburbs for people of all social status. To enhance urban economy and community activities, it is remarkable that wellness infrastructure, such as recreation spaces and illness infrastructure, such as clinics, were developed at the same time as mutually enhancing social prescriptions. This landscape policy became a breakthrough for complex social, political, and economic issues. Facing post-COVID and other issues globally, we park professionals can be encouraged by this story. And 150 years later, and also just 150 years ago from today, the new government declared the establishment of parks. In the very beginning, the government designated existing recreation spaces as public parks. A 150-year-old cherry blossom viewing site and some part of temples and shrines used by the common people changed into parks as we call so to this day. This legislation helped the government prepare for systematic reformations of tax revenues and social classes. This law became a stepping stone for reforming the tax system to abolish social status and create an equal society, as well as to support that. This photo shows the same cherry blossom viewing site as in the previous slide. Later, public parks were newly developed as part of urban planning. This is the first Western-style public park, made in 1903. In post-war Japan, toward the 1970s, many play lots were developed as part of the park system. Those play lots are scattered across residential areas, expected to function as urban green spaces in easily walkable distance. If you go to larger parks, you'll find rich natural features. Since the development of accessible parks in Japan has been well achieved today, the next challenge is to maximize their potentials for solving various social issues. COVID-19 reconfirmed the value of public parks. Now, we all know that parks can promote well-being and resilience in the urban scale. Next, let's look at aging issues in Japan very briefly. Let's begin with demographic changes. This shows changes and estimations from 1990 to 2065. Today, the population of people older than 65 has exceeded 30%. It is called hyper-aging society. Aging has become a huge burden for the working generation. The graph shows increasing public spending on pension and medical services for older adults. The aging demography even leverages the burden per taxpayer. This trend has spread anxiety among younger generations. But just anxiety?
Please let me excuse. I'm going to show the shock news article in the next slide.
This anxiety sometimes results in hostile conflicts. Back in February, this news story sparked controversies in Japan. Although this is an extreme case, it indicates hidden frustration. This difficulty in Japan today could become a future of other countries too. I believe we need to prevent it together and make aging a positive concept for all generations. Now, something more positive, let's talk about possibilities with pictures. Parks offer a rare occasion for people in all ages to come across in one place. Parks offer a reality different from statistics and mass media. It is the very basic fact that we all are the same human species and that we share the same place for living. We often forget this, but parks can help people recover this reliable ground. To enhance this possibility, I have provided programs for actively using parks. This is from a slow jogging event. Mild physical activities like this, between passive recreation and competitive sports, is an important field for wider participation. This is a game called Mulki, from kids to older adults. Anyone can join it. Park yoga is very inviting for older adults too. Seeing the face of each other helps us think in more sympathetic ways. As we all know from COVID-19, faceless communication often deepens social divisions, and we all know that it becomes a political burden. In this sense, I believe offering intergenerational opportunities in parks has significant political impacts. Therefore, I collaborated with a research entity called LBA to advocate the central role of landscape policies. We printed it in a brochure to give it to policymakers and park professionals in public and private sectors. It emphasizes 4 areas: health, education, local economy, and master planning, together with tools and programs to realize the idea. Now, let me conclude this presentation by sharing our basic thought. It is important to accept we all are aging with many living things around us. Let's say living is aging or being ageable. Once we accept aging, why not make it positive? I think 30 years is a good framework for planning positive aging together with our cities and communities. It is important to welcome the fact that we all are aging. All generations, and even our cities can keep aging. We all take part in collective changes in our shared living environment. Let's guide our capacity of aging to positive, co-aging of all ages. Last but not least, our idea is greatly inspired by 880 cities and global initiative to make cities comfortable for both 8-year and 80-year-old people.
Thank you. I'm done with my presentation. And next presenter is founder of the 880 cities, Gil Peranosa. So please, Gil. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Hello. Hello. I'm sorry we are running a little bit out of time, but I want to tell you my name is Gil Penalosa. Originally, I'm from Bogota, Colombia, and I have World Urban Parks in my heart. I was elected twice as chair of World Urban Parks, and also was the first ambassador. When I was in Colombia, I was able to lead the design and construction of over 200 parks, including many programs for older adults. In Canada, I created a nonprofit called 880 Cities, which has a simple concept. What if everything we did in our cities had to be great for an 8-year-old and for an 80-year-old? Not 8 to 80, 8 and 80 as an indicator. Because if it's good for the 8 and it's good for the 80, it's going to be good for everybody, from 0 to over 100. Also, I created Cities for Everyone, which does webinars and does master classes. As an example, in 2 weeks, 2 weeks from tomorrow, we're doing a master class on our third act, age-friendly cities. And I think that we need to be, I'm very glad that this webinar, and I'm very glad about the Committee on Older Adults in World Urban Parks, because I think the two generations that parks and recreation usually live out around the world is the 0 to 4-year-old and the people over 60. The people over 60 is 1/3 of our lives. It's the fastest growing segment of the population everywhere. People talk about some aging countries. No, every single country, people are living longer. In some countries, there's more people aging compared to with children. But that doesn't mean that in all the countries, even the ones that have lots of children, like countries in Africa, in Latin America, also the people are living longer. Every single country in the world, every country, more than double the life expectancy in the last 150 years. And toward the future, in the next 30 years, we are going to double the population over 60. We are going to quadruple the population over 80. And I think that we should work on the over 60. I call it our third act. The first act is from 0 to 20 when we're kids and learning and educating, then from the 20s to the late 50s, and then over 60. It's 1/3 of our life. And usually what's in the mind of cities is that the older people, senior people are fragile, are weak, are in long-term care homes. Yes, we end up being dependent the last 3 or 4 years of our life. But we have more than 80% of the years as older adults that we're very independent. And there are some big problems, such as isolation, such as loneliness. The Surgeon General in the US says that isolation is the equivalent, the impact, as if we smoke 15 cigarettes in one day. Isolation gives all kinds of problems, mental health, physical health, some types of cancers, osteoporosis, all kinds of things. So we need to work, and the parks can be a fantastic way of improving, allowing people to live older, healthier, happier. Stephanie spoke about some of the programs of ARP. ARP, for example, is a magnificent organization, has over 38 million members in the US, paid members. And sometimes I work with them on age-friendly communities. And this is important on how to develop activities. For example, the well-being. We know we need to improve the health. It doesn't matter what health system you have in any country in the world. If it's only healthcare, we need to promote health. We need people to be healthier. We need people, for example, the well-being. Well-being is being well. For example, eating healthier. Part of eating healthier, it helps if we do allotment gardens in the parks, if we do farmers markets in the parks. Also, we need to socialize in the parks. Let's have people. It's not only about doing walking paths. We need to do walking groups, knitting groups in the park, doing activities. Most of the cities in the US and Canada and Australia and all over have very, very few programs for people over 60. People over 60 are anxious to have programs, not events that are once a year, no, programs, daily, weekly, so that it can have some kind of impact. So socializing. Also, we need to have contact with nature, and the parks is magnificent. Everybody needs to have a park close within walking distance. The wealthiest country in the world, the US, 1 out of 3 citizens, 1 out of 3 older adults does not have a park within walking distance. We need to solve that immediately. We cannot say in 30 years, in 30 years we're gonna be dead. We need to solve it now, as soon as possible. And also we need to promote physical activity. Everybody is looking for a magic pill. There is no magic pill. The magic pill to be healthier physically, mentally, socially, for cancers, for depression, for anxiety, also is physical activity. And the only way is to walk or bike or play as a normal part of everyday life. And I think this is where parks and recreation can play a magnificent role in helping communities, but also on equity. When you arrive to any city by plane and you fly, it's very easy from the air to see where the rich people live and where the poor people live, because the wealthy areas have lots of trees, lots of parks, and the poor areas have very few trees and very few parks. So we need to make a call to action that we need equity in parks, and the older people in the lower income areas have less facilities. So when we focus on living older, healthier and happier, equity has to be at the top of the list. And we need to work on those areas. The poor people, the older people that are poor, when they feel worse is in the leisure area. All poor people need even better parks, better trees, better nature, better programs, better contact. So my call to action is that we should focus on the 60 plus. Let's keep in mind, older people are givers. They are not takers. Older people are assets to the community, not liabilities. I want to end with an anecdote. Last year I was working in Arizona in the desert botanical garden. In this botanical garden in the middle of the desert, they have 400 volunteers. All 400 of them are over 55 years old. Fantastic. They work between 2 and 4 days a week. Older people, one of the things that people need for mental health is to have a purpose, to have a reason why to get up and get out of bed. So imagine the botanical garden could never hire 400 paid people. And these older people also, they didn't have anything to do. So it's a win-win. It's good for the older adults, good for the botanical gardens. And we could have older people. Also, we heard a lot about multi-generation. Now we see in the parks, 2, 3, 4 generations at the same time. The mix of the young and the old. Every playground for children, you have a nice cozy area for the grandparents. So there is a lot to do, and I think that I'm very happy that Water Bank Parks has a vibrant committee on older adults. And because this is something that is usually left out as an afterthought, and we need to bring it as a top priority. And the goal is living older, healthier, and happier. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gil, and everyone. Absolutely brilliant presentations, and it's amazing to get such a global insight. But we have very little time, but one question we would like to, one of our members of our audience has raised. How do you create successful programs, like Gil says, not events for older people? What are the key elements these need to have? Perhaps Gil, in fact, you would like to kick off with an answer to this one, please.
Well, one of the things that I've seen that works very well is that the city, the government has to lead and lead by example. But the government cannot do the programs with older adults in every single neighborhood. Something that works very well when I was commissioner in Bogota, I created a capacity building for older people. So in 3 months, we would train older people how to organize programs for other older people, giving them the formats how to organize yoga or Tai Chi or dancing. Very, very popular physical activity, dancing from 5:30 to 10:30 at night, only for people over 55. So how to multiply? So that is not only 1 or 2 or 3 big programs that the city does, but how to multiply, and also how to get the cities to allow people to use their parks for free. Don't charge anything if they're developing programs. So the multiplying effect is very important, and also to the benefit. Don't sell this to the city as something that is for fun and games, which is very important. But that's a program that is for health, for mental health, for physical health, and for general well-being.
Thank you very much. Another question we have for Rio Onu from our audience, Andreas Rodriguez. This is a question that is, what could be a great strategy for young professionals to make more involvement of the elderly and children in public spaces, and possibly achieve a cohesion like the image shown in the image of, excuse my pronunciation, Shikinu no Hanami Tsukushi, and finally try to replicate it in various places. Ryu, please.
You have you're on mute. There you go.
Okay.
So if necessary, I can help you.
Yeah. So what the question was?
四季の花見のような、ああいう光景を作り出すには、今日の、プロの景観の人々はどのような努力をすればできるでしょうか。つまり、どのようにあのような、景観に近づいていけるでしょうか。Okay, sorry, I translated the question into Japanese.
Yeah. So I speak the Japanese. So 造園家は、その土地の花、木をとてもよく知っています。でそれをどういうふうに色を合わせて、木が生えたいと思う土地に、その場所をその木々に与えていくっていうのが一つ、大事な考え方です。無理やり、連れてくるってことはないです。はい、
で、あとその後、多世代交流の話もつなげてください。今のは植栽の話だけなので。
はいはいはい。
Okay, so let me translate what he says. First, regarding the plant, park professions in Japan know local knowledge about which plant may go well in the local environment. So basically, they can plant best flowers in its local conditions, and he will continue on the intergenerational communication program now. はい、どうぞ。
はい。 で、人々が、じゃあそういうところに来る人たちというのは、植物に詳しいわけではないのですけれども、その植物を眺めること、誰かと一緒に眺めることっていうのが、みんなが交流するきっかけになります。そのようにして、日本人はその、植物が生えてるところに集まるというふうな、ことを行います。
And visitors to these gardens are not necessarily familiar with the plant species, but they have intergenerational pleasure to come together and enjoy plant together in such opportunities. So basically, to realize this type of intergenerational experience in Japan, still plant play a significant role to promote people coming to the gardens. Hi.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm wanting to ask if any of the panelists have also questions to each other, perhaps, at all, before we conclude. No. Well, we've run over time a little bit here, but thank you very much indeed for everybody taking part. Absolutely fascinating, and it will be great to digest this more with reviewing the recordings. So thank you again. Alicia, is there anything further you'd like to mention?
Yes, well, before we let you all go, thank you so much again to the panelists and again to the co-chairs of the Aging Committee for this webinar. I want to invite all of you to the webinar that we're going to have tomorrow at 1 p.m. EST. This is another webinar as part of our World Urban Parks Week 2023. In this webinar, we're going to hear from the play experts at Kaboom about the Play Space Inequity Prioritization Index, or PIPI, a new methodology for estimating playscape inequity. They're going to describe the 21 factors involved in this methodology, look at examples from Baltimore and from 3 rural counties in Colorado, and show how quality data is incorporated into the model. So do expect that tomorrow morning. You can find all of the information and the registration links at worldurbanparks.org or at any of our social media. And if you have any further questions to our panelists that you haven't been able to make today, feel free to reach out. I believe that they're all in the World Urban Parks community, so you can reach out to them directly through the discussion forums, through our directory at worldurbanparks.org, and learn a lot more from them as well. So thank you again so much, and we hope to see you very soon. We hope to see you tomorrow, actually. Goodbye.